We'd like to call to order our City of Palaca Community Redevelopment Agency December 12, 2016 meeting. We'd like to have our invocation and pledge of allegiance. Commissioner Norwood, would you please lead us in the invocation and pledge? Would everyone stand?
Let's bow our heads. Most gracious, everlasting God, Heavenly Father, we thank you, God, for this opportunity that you've given us to come together and take care of the business that's before us. Father, we have prayer now, Father, for the communities, oh Father, that's going to be represented. We pray, oh Heavenly Father, that you will give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, oh Father, so that we might honor you in all that we do. And Father, we ask that you not only bless staff, but bless this entire city as a whole, Father. And as you do, oh God, we be ever careful to honor you in all that we do. For us in Jesus' name, we do pray it for his sake. Amen. Amen. Please join me in our pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Hill,
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown,
Present.
Commissioner Campbell,
Present.
Commissioner Norwood,
Present.
Commissioner Fly, Arts Commissioner Moore,
Present.
Mr. Sam Deputy,
Present.
and Commissioner Blake. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from our October 10th, 2016 meeting and our call meeting on November 10th, 2016?
Motion to approve.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. No action will be taken on items that are here for public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one, we'll close public comment. We'll move on to our regular agenda, TIF requests. TIF request number 1 is commercial rehab grant application for 623 and 635 Laurel Street. Tina Duck applicant. And 2 is a CRA development TIF HIP revisions by staff. So we'll go with item number 1. It's commercial rehab grant for 623 and 635 Laurel Street. Tina Duck. Ms. Duck, are you present? Would you like to come up? State your name and address for the record.
I'm Tina Duck. My address is 109 Macon Road, Palaca, Florida.
Would you want to just give us a synopsis of your request?
Basically, it's a rundown building. Needs a new roof, new plumbing, new wiring, but it's my neighborhood. So I feel the need to help it and want to put a business in it. And I own Duck Realty. My husband wants the other side. So there's 2 storefronts there. And we were hoping for a facade grant to help us actually bring it up to code.
Okay. Scrivener. I'm sorry, Ms. Tucker.
It's okay.
Actually handle the process of the application, so I'd rather her speak.
Thank you, Ms. Tucker. Well, if we have any more questions, we'll call you back up.
Yes.
Tell me where it is.
It's at 623 and 625 Laurel Street. If you're going down Laurel Street, it's where, it's one of the V's.
The old furniture store?
Oh, okay.
What's the zoning? What's the zoning there? Anyone know?
Yes, it's PUD.
It's a planned unit development.
Yes, it is. We just had that rezoned. We just passed it last
We got a question on that thing.
Commissioner Norwood?
Do anybody know, is there any conditions within the flood?
Can you step back up for us?
Sure. There really weren't. The conditions were that I pay for parking on the side of Laurel for the stripes to be put down the road. That was, and I needed a little more cement in the front for the handicap parking.
Is the planning director present so that we can get the city's perspective on the flood?
No, I don't see Mr. Commissioner. Well, let me reach out and see if he's.
So you need to.
So does your PUD, do you mind me asking a question?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Does your PUD specify the use to which you're gonna make, the use you're gonna make of the property?
The 500 square feet, I think, on the Laurel side of the street, which I think is 623. The one that comes to the corner is 625. The 625 will all be office space, and Chuck has a lot of secondhand things. He collects antiques, and that's what he wanted to do, and they specified 500 square feet for that. We've been approached by barbers, we've been approached by several businesses that would just like to coexist there. And that would work.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it would or wouldn't, and I'm sorry, I don't recall the details of your PUD, but you know the PUD may specify how many businesses can co-locate there. It may specify the locations of the businesses. It may not. I don't know. That's why I'm asking the questions.
I don't believe that. I think that was the only criteria they had, was that 500 square feet was all that Chuck could have for his side.
It used to be a antique, they sold antique stuff and used furniture out of there. And then they live upstairs, I think.
It used to be a laundromat. It used to be a beauty salon school was what it was going to be, and they dropped that idea. But it had a lot of uses over the years.
How much land did they ask for?
Do you want me to go get the PUD? You just adopted it at the last meeting.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that so we can make sure we cover whatever points we've got at this point.
They want 40,000.
I'm sorry, Mr. Crow's here. We'll make it fine. Mr. Crow, as you're approaching, there was a question about the PUD in this case,
Yes, sir.
and maybe you can give us some more information about what was approved.
This PUD was a neighborhood commercial PUD, approved specifically for a narrow set of uses, including a small real estate office, a small retail space, and one living unit on the second floor. And there were certain conditions of on-street parking and site landscaping required as well.
So the retail space must have been what you were referencing as the 500 square feet that your husband was going to use for sale of antiques or something like that?
Yes.
And then the small office was your realtor's office?
Yes.
And was the PUD specific as to limiting it to those two uses, Mr. Crowe?
We limited the office uses to real estate, I believe architects, similar small-scale office, professional office uses, no medical offices, doctor's offices, anything like
And then
that.
the other limitation was just for retail?
Correct.
So as long as you understand, you know, you've read your PUD, and I'm sure you have, and you're familiar with it.
I am.
Can you give us the rest of the details as it relates to the recommendation application and whether it's a match or not?
Certainly. The application was for the full 40,000, which was what the grant was written up to be. The total cost of the project is 65,373 as on the application, which would be a match that is higher actually than the 25% that's required by the application.
Question, what
Yes,
was
sir.
the 127? The
Total.
127,000?
Total construction cost?
Yeah.
That was one of the,
We had,
that was one of the estimates.
I had to submit 3 bids from 3 different contractors, and trust me, that was not easy when they saw the building. Nobody wanted to do it. So what they did was submit a bid, what they thought they could do it for. Then that's what one of those was the 127,000 was for one of those bids.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't read like that when I looked over the information.
I'm so sorry. I can't, I wish I could have written it for them and just handed them to sign it, but they all wrote those themselves.
Like, board, I understood it was just for 623 only. It didn't mention anything about 625. And it said
Those two address-
127,000 for the roof and the facade.
Right. They're attached. It's all connected.
Okay.
It's one building.
Okay, but it just mentioned 623. Okay, but no, you're saying that it's attached.
It's one parcel
Okay.
number with 2
Okay,
addresses.
that helped explain.
Okay.
Thanks.
And so have we used the commercial, when's the last time the commercial rehab was used?
This is the first application that was ever written for it.
And this is, the entire allocation was for, the 40,000 is what we have budgeted for?
To my knowledge, I don't believe that there was anything actually budgeted in this line, Matt.
I'm looking right now.
As best I understand it, this grant application, the grant that this application was written for was put out in 2012, I believe. And this is just the first time that someone has actually applied for it.
Yeah, we don't have anything allocated to that line, so it would have to come from one of the other lines.
So, I guess, I'm looking at the bids. You had one for 127 and one saying they don't won't be able to do the job, and a second one saying they won't be able to do the job and won't bid on it. So do you just have one bid at 127 and you're telling us you're not going to use that?
No, the 63,000 that you have was from Robin Longworth, and he would be the contractor on this project. I've talked to everybody on the list that you have for the city of Palaca as a contractor, a GC, and this was all I got from all of that talking, and nobody wanted to put anything on paper. Nobody wanted to give a bid. Nobody wanted to say no on public record.
Well, Brian did. Brian, he sent you an email and said that he would not be able to
Yes,
provide you with
he
the
did,
bid because
yes.
he said his workload was pretty heavy.
Yes, he did. No, I'm not saying that all of them, but
I don't see the one that said he'd do it.
The 65,000, I think, is the one that's right too.
the one for 63,000. I had filled out, and when I turned this in, I don't know in what order you guys are looking at, because when I turned it in,
Total cost of the project, $65,000.
I can get him on the phone, but he,
Maybe I'm missing it.
I don't
Can you point
know if
out
it's
for
in
me
there or
the
not.
bid?
I'm looking for it right
Okay.
now.
because it might not be a signed paper from him.
Oh, yeah.
You want me to look through this?
Well, you can look through it with me and see what it's like for you.
There's several bids.
That's all of that.
Yes.
Specs.
Three, two to say no and one for 127. I don't see another one.
I didn't see the
We're
60.
upside down.
Does this end it with that?
I just,
This is 60-something thousand. Where you see it? In the very back, right next to the next pink page. Go to your next pink page, Ron.
The next page?
Page
number 2?
Is it a handwritten one?
Yes, that is.
Tab 2?
The handwritten,
No, right there.
Okay, I wasn't on this.
Don is, yeah, he's got it.
Oh, here, yeah, there you go, he did sign.
Is this?
I think it's entitled cost
Yeah,
certification.
I think it,
Did it look?
yeah, I think it, the cost certification review worksheet, and he signed off on it,
Robin Longworth?
yeah.
Okay.
They want 40,000 and then we put something with it. Cause we had enough in there to allocate.
So to continue with the process, once the application was submitted and reviewed for completeness, we contacted the South Historic Neighborhood Association. They put together a committee to review the application and to pass on a recommendation to the CRA board. They did that. The committee met twice. On the second time, they drafted a letter to the CRA board that I believe was attached to your package, recommending the grant, but they had certain concerns or caveats that they also attached in that letter that they wanted to be sure that they made y'all aware of. One I know is that upon completion that the business would actually be able to finish the inside and open. The building official for the city is aware of the grant, and I've spoken with him. And basically what would happen is after any work was done, he would have to go through the normal, certificate of completion of any work. And then the business would be able to open once all that had happened.
That was between like a 4 and 6 month time period. I saw.
Yes.
It would complete.
Yeah,
within
one
4
of
months.
the questions the committee had for Ms. Duck was how long it would take for the process to be finished so that they could see an actual open business in the neighborhood and not just a building pretty on the outside and still empty on the inside.
What happens if it doesn't open in a time frame or doesn't stay open?
That's one of the things that the committee put in their letter to y'all that they wanted that watched upon to make sure that it actually did open. There are really no provisions within the grant, as I could read it, to have that control.
Is that a commercial grant on the property on St. John's Avenue, the 50 or so in the building over there, that was going to be the fitness establishment?
That was a recruitment grant.
A recruitment grant? That business isn't open, is it?
Yes. Yeah,
It is?
yeah.
The operation.
We finally got it open. Do we have the money to do it with it? We did.
Do you have the South Side Historic District minutes to where this letter was actually presented?
It was not held at a meeting. It was a committee meeting and not a neighborhood association meeting, so no minutes were kept, but I had them draft the letter.
You don't keep
That
minutes?
is,
We don't keep minutes of committee meetings?
no, sir, they did not keep minutes of the committee meeting.
That's. Go ahead,
It's
Commissioner
not one
Combs.
of our committees. Southside Historic District Association is not really involved with the city. I mean,
Well, I understand this letter went to them.
That-
They're saying this letter went to them. I just wanted to show where they actually received it.
Well, I'm trying to see if any of them showed up because I believe they had planned to, but they did not.
Did that go to a
Um,
standing committee, or did it go to an appointed committee for this particular project?
It was an appointed committee for this particular project, and I hand-delivered the letter to them.
And who appointed that committee?
The Southside Neighborhood Association, during one of their meetings, appointed that committee. Well, they volunteered.
The grant document calls for the SHNA to establish a committee to review the application so that they don't have to come before the entire body of the SHNA. That's what the actual grant document spells out. So the SHNA met and appointed, some people volunteered, and they were appointed by the SHNA to review and make a recommendation to this body.
Randy?
Yes, sir.
I just have this question. Since this comes from the South Side Historic budget, have they recommended what they would like to see adjusted if this was granted?
What they
it
talked
is their
about
budget.
in the letter as well, they stipulated that they would like to address that at the next SHNA meeting, which will take place in January, because they did want to have some say in a recommendation on where the money would come from, yes.
Would that have to then come back to us for approval again?
Probably, yes, I would
think
imagine
too,
so.
right? Yeah.
I believe it is.
So the question,
if they have to make a recommendation to.
the concern is that, because the South Historic Neighborhood is making a because they're making a recommendation to the commission as it relates to funding, well, to the agency as it relates to funding, even though they're an independent association for all intents and purposes, because they take on a role that can be considered to have some relationship to governmental action, there's a question as to whether sunshine needs to prevail in those meetings. And that's what that's what the conversation was about.
Okay.
Whether, should there be, should they be subject to sunshine as it relates to certain actions that are in place? And because it's almost, it's a quasi type situation, because they're making recommendations back to the commission, to the agency. And so that was really what the question is, as it relates to making sure that we've got minutes, that the communications are limited, so that that there isn't some interpretation that something that can be challenged at a later date.
Okay.
But outside of that, my question is, since we didn't budget for a commercial rehab grant, where do we pull this money from? And I think that's the larger question, because we're not talking about, in essence, a small amount of money to rehab this project. We're talking about pulling 40 grand from somewhere, and taking it from one line item and moving it to another. And so,
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's the question I asked. She said that they wanted, after this approval, they wanted to meet and decide where it came out on their budget.
Well, yeah,
Because
they
this comes
wanted to
out-
give
out
a
of the south side,
recommendation.
but, that would then have to come right back to us again for approval if we did that.
it seems to me that the decisions should come, those decisions should be coming together.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, it just doesn't seem like this is ready to come before the CRA yet.
I agree.
And so I guess with that being the sentiment, what is your recommendation? What do you suggest?
I would suggest we table it until the next CRA meeting, so they have an opportunity to present, this application, but also to address the funding as well.
So specifically, there's a motion, is that a motion?
Yep.
So there's a motion to table, there's a motion to table with the recommendation that we identify the funding adjustments as well as any additional considerations that may be in place.
But and also, I think that we need to probably separate what it may be a part of this as well. They need to bring minutes and all showing where it has come before the South Side Historic District, wherein it's not, so that, as the mayor said earlier, that we will make sure that whatever we do can't be challenged later on.
Their recommendation committee should read the letter and have it part of their minutes, is what you're saying,
Right.
correct? Okay.
Well, yeah, maybe more detailed than that. I was trying to see if there's an exemption. As you all know, the sunshine law applies unless there's a specific statute saying it doesn't. And the exemptions are just itemized, what boards aren't exempt or are exempt. The mayor correctly stated the normal rule is that if a board is a fact-finding only and it's just making a report of the facts that it finds without a recommendation or a selection process, it may not be subject to sunshine law. But if it makes a specific recommendation, the general rule is it is. And if it's subject to sunshine law, then sunshine law applies not just to them taking the letter and voting on it, it applies to their communications about the topic and, the whole 9 yards. So I'll try to find that out as to whether there's a specific exception that lets them operate without the sunshine law, and let you know.
Okay.
So the long and short, we got a motion on the floor. The long and short is we're going to need more research as it relates to that particular issue, just to make sure we cover all concerns and make sure that we're operating properly. There's a motion on the floor and a second to table. Is there any discussion? Now I'll go to you, Mr. Deputy.
I know in previous ones, when companies wouldn't bid, we would ask for a letter from them saying, I declined to bid on this project, because there are some projects that are difficult to get people to bid on. We had one in the 600 ball, but we got companies to say that, and I think that helps us to know that due diligence has been done.
Yeah. Also, in further reading of the grant document itself, the bids weren't required to be turned in with the application. You were required to turn in a scope of work that was sufficient enough to gather the bids once the grant was approved. Sometimes I know it's easier to get bids on projects they know are actually going to happen or not. But yeah, I agree.
And they did supply us with communication saying that they wouldn't bid, so
Right.
I think that kind of suffices as far as that part
We
of
need
it.
to know where the money is going.
Yeah.
We need to let Matt see where the money, look to see where the money is coming from and how much.
So, any further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Questions called, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries unanimously. And I think it's intentional that we didn't give a date certain as to when we tabled it, just in case you guys get the information back sooner than later, then we can try to have a special session to take care of it in a faster way, as opposed to waiting until our next quarterly meeting. Moving the agenda to item number 2, CRA Development TIF HIP revisions.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I've got 2 employees here that we'd like to recognize real quick, and I'd like to be able to send them home. So do you mind if we take that out
Is
of order?
Jermaine one of them?
No, he's just here to watch me. So,
Oh, that's fine, go ahead.
Jermaine, Michelle, come on up, please.
Yes, I want to say especially with this, Jermaine, in my 11 years of the Christmas parade, it's always been difficult to get the streets cleaned. It's always been difficult to get the trash emptied, especially since the city doesn't work on Holy Friday, which is I call the Friday after Thanksgiving. But this year, the lights went up lickety-split, and the streets were cleaned on Wednesday, and then they were cleaned Friday morning. Street sweeper actually even went down the middle of the street. I had never seen that before. And then Friday night, I was expecting Saturday morning, right? I think they got done at midnight Friday night, so that Saturday morning for Small Business Saturday, downtown was perfect. Trash was empty, streets were clean, sidewalks were clean, and it's a disaster after the Christmas parade. I imagine that sweeper emptied several times.
Yes, sir.
All of downtown were shocked, stunned, and it was the talk of the town. So I think these 2, they deserve a raise. We've just never had that kind of cooperation before.
Downtown Merchant, pass that.
Let the record reflect that Mr. Deputy was never recognized. Come on, man. But also, I think that says a lot. But also let the record reflect that Mr. Deputy was satisfied.
Yes,
I think
11 years and we made it.
And to get that commendation from him means that we're making progress.
We're making great progress.
We're making
And
progress.
since then, it's been the same. We're getting the streets cleaned, we're getting the trash emptied, the sidewalks, with all the leaves. It's just been, before we had grass growing in the gutter.
Yes, sir.
And it's been different.
Culture change.
Outsourcing.
It's been great.
Gets more energy.
Yeah.
It stops you from having to do all those other jobs.
Yeah, it's a little bit of all that, but Michelle Castro and Jermaine could join us tonight. Unfortunately, Anthony Cusimano and Charles Poole could not join us. Those along with Tim Brooks and Herman Mites, I can't forget to mention him. All those individuals helped to get us to where we were in preparation and following the
Well, thank you.
event. So,
It was good.
Round of applause for you guys.
Congratulations on passing that.
Listen, I think Mr. Deputy probably said all that needed to be said, because just getting that kind of that type of commendation says a lot as to where we've come from and the direction that we're headed. And we have to make sure we also thank you for your leadership,
Yeah,
Mr. Griffin.
thank you.
And the job that you're doing with Public Works as
I'm
well.
only as good as the people underneath me.
You are, we know that, but we definitely applaud all of you guys for the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Definitely. Moving the agenda to item number 2. Mr. Griffin.
Yes, sir. This is more of a housekeeping exercise. This year, you funded the Central Business District TIF-HIP program, which did not exist. So what we did is we took the 2 existing TIF-HIPs and we removed any verbiage specific to a district and created a CBD TIF-HIP that covers all 3 TIF districts. Administratively, it makes it a little bit easier to administer the program. So we hope you will entertain adopting this program.
You want a motion to accept that?
Yes, ma'am.
Motion to accept recommendation.
There's a motion on the floor in a second. Is there any unreadiness? Questions called. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. Item number 3, direction regarding TIF potable water projects. You're on again. Water improvements.
Yes, as you're all aware, I think Mr. Suggs was able to inform you, last week we got word that we were ranked number 1 and hope to be awarded a $500,000 grant in the Water Management District at tomorrow's governing board meeting. This is very promising considering we ranked number 1. This is the ready cost share, so we did not compete against St. Johns County or the more affluent communities who have the larger projects. We are optimistic that in March we'll be able to put forth phase 2, possibly even phase 3 of the project that we presented and we're just awarded on to get some additional funds to start tackling the water line improvements. The North and the South District have been proactively setting aside funding for a CDBG water line project that we anticipated to occur in the next 2 to 3 years after we close out the commercial grant. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know we got well over 200,000 between the 2 lines. I think there's 184 in the south and a little over 100 in the north. Part of that funding is for engineering, and the engineering will cover the water management district phases as well as the engineering necessary to secure a CDBG grant if there's any water lines within those TIF districts to still be replaced. What I wanted to bring to your attention is the possibility of using tax increment finance funds or portion of your annual allocation to leverage debt service and to possibly go ahead and replace all the necessary lines within the districts that we can over the next year or so. That would then allow the City Commission to apply those future CDBG dollars or any other grant dollars that we can find towards those areas that don't have TIF funds. Be it the South 12th and River Street area, be it the area up around Mosley and Twig, some of the other much needed areas. So we wanted to bring that to you for discussion. I know Matt did some preliminary research on what a 30% of the annual allocation from each TIF district could net as far as a an upfront cash to use. I think that was somewhere in the range of $1.3 million.
So, for those of you that had an opportunity to go to Florida League of Cities legislative conference this week, in our growth management meeting, and I know there were a couple people in this meeting that were present that sat through kind of a grueling conversation about tax increment financing. But overall, the league adopted legislation supporting the use of tax increment financing. There have been some attacks on tax increment financing based upon some of the projects that were in place in South Florida. But there has been a significant push over the last 2 years through our Growth Management Committee to support tax increment financing through the league and also in support of home rule as an opportunity to do that. One of the things that we continually talk about in the city is dealing with the giant, the pink elephant that's in the room. We've got a $28 million elephant that sits there as it relates to our infrastructure. And we have to find ways in which to do what I call is to incur smart debt. And that's debt which will allow us to deal with the real issues that we have. And our main priority is infrastructure. And if we can find ways to increase the quality of life, to deal with the issues that we have as it relates to our water lines being from 1887, then we have to look at those opportunities. I think in looking at those opportunities, we need to get with the districts, with the associations, and make sure that they're on board with what we're talking about by way of workshop, by way of extensive communication, to make sure that everybody's, and that there is a consensus as to how we deal with those issues. And so that's what we're looking at. Any other thoughts?
Just a question, we're talking about 30% of the income. Is that one time, or is that a reoccurring loan for how many years?
If we're talking, let's say for example, if we're talking about a $2 million water line project within a district, then we're talking a reoccurring removal of those funds in order to deal specifically with that. And so the longevity, the long-term effect of it far outweighs what we would be spending on an annual basis, because we don't have the resources to do it any other way, particularly with the fact that the population is a few hundred people higher than where we would be with rural utilities grants. So that's one of the things that we have, Mr. Suggs.
Absolutely, and to piggyback on that a bit, the staff was very careful in when we had these discussions and deliberations as far as what we wanted to bring in front of the CRA tonight, was so that we did not exhaust all the funds that were available in the TIF districts, but we're using 30% of those funds that are available to move this project forward in conjunction with the potential grant we just received with the Water Management District to have a much bigger bang for our buck and get a lot more done at this point in time. But it also leaves us those existing dollars, the other 70%, so to speak, for further projects.
And then the other thing is, I think the thing we ought to be clear of, 30% is just it's a starting point as far as the recommendation, because we're talking long-term financing. Then it depends on what everyone's comfortable with at that point. But it at least starts a conversation.
And it affects the both historical districts. It means everybody gets a bang for their buck in it, because the water and sewer lines are things especially water lines now, that we've had problems with. And we've got to get it done, so.
So I definitely think it's time for us to have the conversation. But the conversation is ripe. It's ripe all across the country right now, and it's a great time for us to workshop. I know that's the word that we don't necessarily like to hear, but this is definitely a necessary time for us to workshop if that's the consensus of the agency.
Well, I know that the pipes on 7th Street have more patch than they have pipe.
That's almost replaced. We're almost done with that run. It's more patch than it is pipe, so.
Yeah, I mean.
We won't have to replace that one in about a month.
Well, I'm not sure about that one. I think that this is a conversation we desperately need, because we still end up downtown with brown water. We still have to let our water run downtown. Every time the valve's open, we have brown water. We've got to do something with that, because people don't like brown water. So I'm all in favor of seeing this move forward.
We've got to move forward, and the thing about it, it's a major problem that's been here for a long time. We're not going to fix it overnight, but we can be creative in using the resources that we do have in order to make things better, to increase the quality of life, to increase the quality of water overall. And it takes us making some bold movement.
Everybody won't be happy with it when we start, but when we finish, we'll have everybody happy, because everybody will be getting better water. And we got to start somewhere, because to eat an elephant, you got to start with the first bite.
So if it's Commissioner Norwood,
I think anything that we can do to start to move this elephant forward, I think we need to be doing. I think this actually helps us and probably frees us up and puts us in a position to be more focused,
Right.
you know, within the city as well on infrastructure needs.
So Mayor, we,
Mr. Griffin?
kind of saying, asking our staff people to move forward with looking at it.
How soon would you want to have a workshop on this issue?
It would be beneficial to have it in January so that when we move forward with the engineering in February, assuming we get a contract offer from the district in January as well, that we're not holding up that engineering process. We know what we're designing for, if you will.
Okay, can you make sure we contact everyone
Before the night of time?
with the vested interest in this?
Is there any suggestion as to where we hold the meeting?
Can I request that we, if possible, that we hold it before the 9th, before I have to go back to school, because yeah.
That's up to y'all. Y'all tell us when to schedule it and we'll do
I
it.
think that's the sentiment of both. We have two educators in here, so.
I think,
For the 9th.
Legs.
Mr. Mayor, we put out an RFP yet for engineering?
That's coming before the city commission tonight for affirmation of the ranking.
so it may be one that probably be better served, either doing it here or at Hammock Hall or somewhere, which allows us to be able to be within the neighborhood. And I guess we'll leave that up to you as to what location you think is best.
We'll get together. And
Okay.
is there consensus to try and do it before January 9th?
No.
Everyone on board, we're getting it done before early January? Okay, that's fine.
Get early.
Thank you.
That's good.
You're outvoted.
One night.
Sorry, you won't get out of this.
Moving the agenda. Item 4, plan revisions and creation of new district. Mr. Crow and Mr. Griffith.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'm going to pass this out, kind of walk you through it if I can.
Is this it?
Please pass it up.
Thank you for making it big enough for us to see.
Yeah, the old map was a little difficult, but from the last meeting, this is kind of what we did based on your input. This north-central CRA that you see here was extended over to the north side CRA so that there wasn't a gap between the two. So, and what we also did was with the Reed Street CRA, for example, we kind of worked the boundaries so that they excluded public housing areas and a few large churches and focused on essentially tax-paying properties. We also added the Cypress Mills potential CRA. Mr. Griffith, I think, is going to talk about. So this is kind of just a very, again, preliminary. You know, we have to do the legwork on this, what's called a blight study, to see if it qualifies for potential CRA areas, and then it's a policy decision to determine if that's what the commission wants to do. There's been some discussion about the tax increment. Mr. Reynolds is probably best suited to speak to that, but what we're doing is just kind of showing you what these potential districts could be. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Crowe, I guess, in looking at the map, there are areas on the north side that, you know, and I know that there's a lot of public housing over there as well, but also there's some areas with some housing that really need to, we need to put a mechanism in place in order to get them up to standard, I guess, for lack of a better term. Is there a reason why we didn't include those areas on the north side here?
Not really. I mean, we started out with a very, I don't want to say generic, but a very basic, quick, kind of a back of the envelope type thing. I think as we move into this process, if the commission decides they do want to establish these districts, we would do block by block surveys and look at housing conditions and look at the potential for combining residential and commercial areas in kind of a productive way. So yeah, there's work to be done.
Because I guess one of the things that I don't want to get into segregating the different neighborhoods. I think one of the things we want to do is make sure that we stay unified. And it's kind of like the mayor had talked about, I guess a couple of months ago, that we giving everybody the opportunity to grab their own bootstraps, and also grab individuals within the community, grab, hold, and pull those other neighbors up to work to the standard that they're at as far as housing goes as well.
Mr. Crowe, since we're in the infancy stage, I mean, I agree with Commissioner Norwood. Since it's in the infancy stage, I think we should also include those other areas. And then if they decide that they don't want to be part of it, or however lines need to be drawn, I think we can make the adjustments at that time. But I think the initial stage, we should include. That's my.
I can appreciate that. Thank you.
I agree with that, although I agree with the public housing. I noticed that the headquarters are in the Reed Street CRA for the public housing. But the area that the old timers call the white apartments, the old public housing over by Central Academy and that.
They all kind of colors now. They all kind of colors now. They being.
I don't think that that's in one of these districts, and you know, that's all totally blighted.
Yeah.
Looks like it is.
Yeah, it is blighted.
Yeah, and I think those need, but I'm not sure within this North Central CRA that there is going to be enough funding coming in from that neighborhood with incremental, with the way our taxes are going down here. I don't see where there's enough how can I say that?
There's no tax down.
I was going to clarify that the way the tax increment funding works is once you establish the tax increment fund for a certain area, you set
A base.
right, whatever year you set that as the base taxable year. And then the idea is that as the taxable value goes up, the increment between the base year and whatever the current year value is, the taxes on just that incremental portion is what goes into the fund to be spent. So if the taxes aren't going up, there's going to be nothing coming into the fund.
And a lot of that area is already under the taxable value except for the fire tax, correct? I mean, there's a number in there that are under the 25,000.
But I think too, is once they begin to rehab some of those houses, the value of that property is gonna go up and increase your tax increment monies as we go along and give. You know, you may not be able to do but one house, maybe next 5 years, but, you know, but the tax revenue that you would get from rehabbing that one house would help you with the next one and probably get it quicker.
Well, I wondered why we couldn't go with the North Central CRA, take in the north half of the Reed Street CRA.
Right, because
So
you
that
wanna.
my property over there, and Central State's property is paying into it.
So that you tie, because you always want to tie in a business district
Right.
into what you have with the residential so that you can use the
Unless
offset.
there's
But if you use purely residential, then you're going to find that, you're going to have that issue.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the tie-in.
I think those are good points, and there's the ability to really combine that Reed Street and North Central CRA, because I think Reed Street can essentially function as the engine of redevelopment and hopefully help the neighborhoods around it.
Can you take Reed Street and North Central and make it one district?
I don't see why not. There's no real limitation on size or,
Well, you can take the west end and maybe make that a separate district then. That's what I call the Y,
right?
you know, that extension you have going out that way.
Right.
Well, because you have two, and that would be a huge district to combine them, but I just think we need more commercial in that North Central.
I agree with that. And so,
And the other thing we don't think about a lot of times, if they get that some funding in there, it's not enough, we can look at leveraging of, our CR, our community development block grant stuff, other housing stuff. And sometimes we have to put 2 or 3 of those funding sources together to bring those houses up to standard. So if there's a bit there that we can put with another bit, we can probably get more houses done.
the other thing I want us to look at, and looking at your map, looking at the northern corridor, the riverfront, the fact that it's totally undeveloped, and through mitigations or other sources, we may at some point see development on that corridor. So, and I guess the question is, should we include, properties like the Turner Trust in that, in this conversation, so that when that development comes, we see significant increases as it relates to what we're getting from a tax increment standpoint. Because right now, those properties, don't carry much in terms of value, but we know from a potential standpoint it could.
But Mr. Mayor, I agree with you totally. And the reason I agree with you, because if that development ever occurs, then I guess how the traffic's going to be able to get to that property has to go through those neighborhoods, and it's going to increase the value of that, not only that neighborhood, but also that property that's going to be developed as well.
It's going to increase the need for ingress and
Right.
different modes of ingress and egress as well. But I think when we look at those properties, for example, the properties at the end of 17th Street, some of those properties where the old Cypress Mills were on the other side of 7th and 8th, and those areas, those are developable lands that are next to marshland or next to, or with direct access to the river. Once those properties are developed, then it creates a significant opportunity, because we're talking multi-million-dollar values on those properties. And so it creates the conversation, but I think for today's purpose, we're getting close to our 6 o'clock mark. I think we've kind of given some good, a little bit of good information as far as continuing the discussion.
Thank you.
And definitely thank you guys for the work you've done in drawing that up. CRA Administrator.
That's, I don't know why my name's attached to it, Mr. Mayor, but it's back on there because it was on the last agenda item, and there was no discussion as far as movement in either direction with it.
Okay. My suggestion is that we wait until our next meeting. We've got 2 positions that are going to have to be filled on this agency. I would suggest that we wait to continue that conversation once we have our new seats in place.
Yeah. Do you need a motion to do that, or just pass it?
I'll entertain a motion just for housekeeping purposes.
All right, I think that we need to wait till our next meetings to look at.
There's a motion to table on the floor. There's a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to our reports. SBDC, we have a written report from SBD.
They did not give a written or a verbal. She's not going to be here, and she said that she will submit the year-end report in January.
Okay. Can you let her know that we are looking for her presence? She asked for additional funding. She got additional funding, but we want additional presence.
And I can't remember the reason she told me she wasn't going to be here.
We get that
That's fine.
We get that every meeting, though.
But we've done that for multiple meetings. For the last few meetings, we want her presence, because we want to hear about the wonderful things that she's doing in this community,
Downtown. In town.
throughout the county.
I want inside the city. He's gonna give her that much money.
North Tiff District Advisory Committee. It's Elizabeth.
Good evening, ladies, gentlemen. Elizabeth Van Rensburg, 310 North 3rd Street. I have recently taken back over the presidentship of the North Historic District, something which, of course, thrilled me absolutely to no end. We have just finished having a Christmas tour of homes on December 3rd, which went very, very well. It probably would have gone a little bit better if I had come to you for a little bit of CRA seed money, but we did not, and I think we did a really great job of it on our own, not involving any money from you. Apart from that, tonight in about 20 minutes is my first meeting back as the president, and I have a number of really great, fantastic fundraising, promotional, and other exciting things that I would like for our membership to consider. Apart from that, it's all great on the north side, as always, and thank you for allowing me to come this evening and speak with you.
Thank you for the happy report.
Yes, sir.
South Tiff. Is there anyone from the south? Seeing no one, we will move to other reports. Is there a second?
Second.
I would still like to ask for a financial report each meeting, because I feel lost not knowing, what we're doing or what we're spending, and I'm just one of those that likes to keep up.
We did agree on the last meeting that we.
Yes.
We would.
That's,
And just as a follow-up, can you send one out can you guys get one out to us within the next? Okay, very well. In the next few minutes. I was about to say the next week.
He can do it right away, I know.
Seeing no
Make
objection,
it,
we're now
make it big
adjourned.
enough, make it